Okay, so I'm going to talk you through this model that we have in the classroom of the alveoli. And so I think one thing to appreciate is at this point we are down very, very small structures. Here we've got airway leading into it. And so one thing to realize is that we have gone all the way through trachea and primary bronchi and secondary and tertiary bronchi and continue to branch and branch and branch, and now we're all the way down to bronchioles. And in fact, this big segment here is going to be a terminal bronchiole, and so this marks the end of that conducting portion of our respiratory pathway. And we can see branching off the terminal bronchiole here are going to be these guys, and these are going to be respiratory bronchioles. So now we actually start the respiratory portion of our airway tract, where we actually are going to have some gas exchange occurring. So this is going to be terminal bronchiole, and here coming off respiratory bronchioles. And so we see these respiratory bronchioles, and what's going to happen with them is that they're going to lead into a sac of alveoli. Okay, so what we call this whole segment here is going to be an alveolar sac. Okay, and we can see this little opening here leading from respiratory bronchiole into the sac. This is going to be our alveolar duct. Okay, that's what that little opening there is representing. Okay, so the alveolar sacs are going to be basically like clusters of grapes. It's kind of the best analogy to have. So the whole sac would be like an entire cluster of grapes, and then we can take out each individual grape, and that's what we see here. So these would be like each individual grapes, and in this case they're going to be alveoli, because that's what we see in the lungs. So each little one is going to be an alveoli, and these are the ones that we talked about that are going to be very, very thin walls to allow for gas exchange, and this is where the magic happens in the lungs. Okay, so one of the things to think about too is when we look at our terminal bronchiole, we can see these kind of strips of smooth muscle across them. And so this is basically the way that we can control airflow traveling down into our alveoli. So when we have contraction of those smooth muscles, we're going to end up with bronchoconstriction, where we're limiting airflow down to that particular area, similar to maybe what would happen during an asthma attack. When that smooth muscle relaxes, we're going to end up with bronchodilation, and so increased airflow due to decreased resistance. Another thing to keep in mind too is that we can see some blood vessels in this model too. So we've got this vessel here, it's colored blue, which would make you maybe initially think, oh, that must be a vein. And in the systemic artery or systemic circulation, that would be true. It would be a vein carrying oxygen-poor blood. But in this case, what we're going to see is that this is a pulmonary artery, a branch from the pulmonary artery. Okay, because again, it's entered the lungs at the hilum and it's continued to branch and branch and branch, and now we're down to actually very small vessels traveling into capillary beds. So this would be really indicative of some pulmonary arterioles leading into capillary bed, right? And that's where we're going to have gas exchange happen, that close association between the capillaries and the alveoli. And then coming out the other side, we are going to have pulmonary venules that are now containing oxygen-rich blood that are going to join and join and join and eventually form the pulmonary vein that's going to travel back to the heart so that the heart can pump all of that oxygenated blood out to the rest of the body.